Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a decree to withdraw Russia from the ICC. Putin's decree came a day after the UN General Assembly's Human Rights Committee approved a resolution condemning Russia's temporary occupation of Crimea and blamed Moscow for rights abuses and discrimination against some Crimean residents. Yeah, the Russian President Vladimir Putin signed that decree to withdraw Russia from the ICC. The ICC, of course, was established in 1998 and has over 100 member states, and it aims to prosecute against war crimes, genocide and crimes against humanity. Amnesty International released a statement saying that Russia's withdrawal is a huge blow to international justice. Just hours before Russia's announcement, the UN human rights chief called on countries not to leave the Rome Statute. Earlier this year, of course, South Africa, Burundi, Gambia and Malawi also filed formal plans to leave the world body. I'm joined now from our Pretoria studio by the Russian ambassador to South Africa, Mr. Mikhail Ivanovich Petrakov. A very good morning to you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for being with us on Newsroom today.
Good morning, and thank you for granting me this opportunity to talk to our viewers on important international issues.
The announcement by President Putin to withdraw from the ICC, just give us a little bit of background that maybe sits outside of South Africa's context.
Let me start with saying that Russia has been consistently advocating prosecuting those responsible for most serious international crimes. Our country was at the origins of the Nuremberg and Tokyo tribunals and participated in the development of fundamental documents on the fight against genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. That was the reason why Russia voted for the adoption of the Rome Statute and signed it in the year 2000. The ICC, as the first permanent body of international criminal justice, actually inspired high hopes of the international community. Unfortunately, the court failed to meet the expectations to become a truly independent, authoritative international tribunal. Views to that effect on its inefficiency and one-sided approach were voiced in different fora, including United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council. It is also worth noting that during 14 years of the court's work, it passed only 4 sentences, having spent over $1 billion. Now, on the particular issues the Russian Federation has with the court, I would like first to stress that we cannot be indifferent to the court's attitude vis-à-vis the situation of August 2008, when the Saakashvili regime of Georgia launched an attack on a peaceful city of Tshinval, the principal city of South Ossetia, killing dozens of Russian peacekeepers and numerous civilians there. And it was established internationally by independent international observers that it was the then President Saakashvili who started the hostilities. However, when it came to the court, the assassination of the Russian peacekeepers resulted in the court's accusations against South Ossetian militia and Russian soldiers. The eventual investigations of actions and orders of Georgian officials was left to the discretion of the Georgian justice and remains outside of the focus of the ICC prosecutor's office attention. This development speaks for itself. The second issue, you've mentioned the Crimea here. And we see the attempts by the court representatives to present the events in Crimea and in Donbass as a military conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which totally contradicts the reality, because the issue in question is the internal Ukrainian conflict. As for the Crimea, I should remind that the position of the court also contradicts the position of the people of Crimea, who had a referendum where they voted in favor of going out of Ukraine and joining the Russian Federation, and mind you, over 90% of those who voted, and it was about 86% of the voters, voted in favor of joining the Russian Federation. To wrap it up, when we look at the court's action from the Russian perspective and when we analyze its attitudes and position, we see that we can hardly trust the ICC. In this regard, the démarche of the African Union, which has decided to develop measures on a coordinated withdrawal of African states from the Rome Statute, is understandable. And as you yourself have mentioned, some of the states are already conducting these procedures.
I wanted to ask you about Africa and South Africa's stance, in particular with regards to the ICC and the kind of backstory that we've seen about African heads of state often being persecuted by the ICC when we see other crimes against humanity, things that happen in Iraq and weapons of mass destruction and the like, go unlooked at, despite the fact that we have that these countries are outside, of course, signatories of the Rome Statute. But how do you view what's happening with South Africa and on the African continent?
To my knowledge, the attempts to bring different cases to the court's attention were coming from 139 countries. And it is only 8 countries, and all of them are African countries, from which the suspects or convicts are there in the court. The issue of being part or not being part of an international structure or of international legal instrument is the issue belonging to the domain of sovereign rights of each and every country. So if a country decides that being a part of, in this case, International Criminal Court is not in her national interests, like it was in the case of Russia, then it's up to the country to realize its sovereign rights.
Mr. Ambassador, in conclusion, international justice is now, of course, under the spotlight because of this. In Russia, how do you believe we ensure international justice going forward?
Well, of course, there are different instruments to that effect, and the work of these instruments should be based not on a one-sided approach, but on the principle of objectivity and on the principle of justice. This is the way forward.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today on the Newsroom Show. That is the Russian ambassador here to South Africa, Mikhail Ivanovich Petrakov, joining us from the capital, Pretoria, talking about why Russia have now also decided to leave the International Criminal Court, or, well, withdraw from the Rome Statute, as it were.